Here, and today I'm here with only one of my co-hosts, Michael Graves, a.k.a. Big Mike.
Namaste.
And we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience. Unfortunately, Julian Harper and Father Lucas won't be with us today. They're on community cop assignment, but they will be rejoining us hopefully next week. This is where truth and real talk occurs. As is customary, let's go right into some of the historical events that we like to acknowledge. Many of you who watched the program over the years should be familiar with our first topic. It's happened in Oklahoma City. It was one of the first, well, I can't really say one of the first terrorist attacks, because the United States had so many terrorist attacks on the black community and the indigenous Indian population. But this is one historic. It was a very thriving black community with banks, schools, law enforcement protections, middle class thriving. And it was attacked. It was actually bombed by the United States government, and the certain murders took place. Mike, why don't you remind our audience about this very historic, not as often spoke about event, the attack on Black Wall Street?
Well, certainly the Tulsa, Oklahoma event, Greenwood, as you would you might call it, Black Wall Street are among the names, but certainly this started out with an elevator incident. A black man had to use the elevator. He was actually shining shoes downtown Greenwood, and he had to walk several blocks to the elevator, the only place that he could, relieve himself. So when he got on the elevator buckled, briefly, and he bumped into a white woman. And one white guy saw it. She made no complaints. And ultimately, by the end of the day, he was talking to people, and it elevated and got bigger and bigger. And eventually, it went from bumping into her to an assault, actually, obviously with sexual connotations. Consequently, white people got riled up. They were riled up already because black people were doing so well, as Noel pointed out, was doing extremely well. And those black people was in the encirclement of white people. Consequently, they got really upset. And a little known fact that it was the African Brotherhood led by Cyril Briggs, who came out of New York under the leadership of Hubert Harrison, and then later on, Marcus Garvey. His organization was there, and when they heard that white people were going to storm the jail because the authorities decided to lock the black man up because they thought he would be safer, as opposed to a white mob which was going to go to his house and just kill him outright. So when they thought that the jail was going to be stormed, the African Brotherhood parked their vehicle right in front of the jail. And when a white guy from the mob that was set up went over there and they had some words, the white guy ended up getting his brains blown out because he challenged one guy, and all the African Brotherhood all had shotguns and rifles. And once the guy was shot, that started the riot and the white riot. And ultimately, they killed somewhere between hundreds and thousands. You take your pick. But they burnt blocks and blocks. The entire community, anybody that got out of there was lucky. And so they try to act like in the state of Oklahoma that this did not happen. But there were some survivors. And out of these thousands of people, the few that survived, and it wasn't a lot that survived. I mean, some people that got to the swamps got killed by alligators and what have you, or drowned. And but the people who made it and ended up all scattered across America told a story, an horrific story of what actually happened. And over the course of 3 or 4 days, they killed literally everybody they could kill. And the few people who survived, they was made to clean up the bodies, the black bodies. They was ordered by the white people to clean up the black bodies.
And this is, there was always a fake justification in the eyes of white society to commence this savage attack. And, it's so comical that their response was allegedly, their actions was allegedly in response to what they considered to be a crime. So by responding to a crime, they just went out and killed everything black in sight that they can find.
Oh, men, and they took their property, too.
Right, took their property. And we're talking about men, women, and children. I really know the impetus of that was they was just so jealous that that town was doing so well. White folks, they don't want you to be next to them. But if you get too far for them and are successful, they don't like that either. So that's incidents that should live in the minds of our community infinitum. And also, this is the anniversary of the death of Omar Edwards. Omar Edwards was an off-duty police officer who was murdered after he approached an individual breaking into his vehicle while he was taking police action in pursuit of trying to arrest or apprehend this individual. A white plainclothes officer who seen him in pursuit of this individual automatically assumed he was a criminal and shot him in the back and ultimately killed him. He claimed, the white officer, that Omar Edwards was in pursuit of this criminal. And when he said, "Police, stop, police don't move," after running after this individual, Omar Edwards stopped, turned around, faced him with his weapon, and then turned back around for him to get shot in the back. We know that that is not true. Ultimately, this is the story that the officer told. He wasn't prosecuted, and he still kept his job, although the New York State Police Department gave his fake support and sympathy to the family of Omar Edwards. What they really should have did was given him justice and prosecuted this police officer. What are your memories? Because we were a very integral part of this particular case. He even met with District Attorney in Manhattan, calling for the prosecution of this, Morgenthau, calling for the prosecution of this officer. What are your memories of this murder?
Well, it's so clear in my mind as to, what happened not only that night, because they claim that somehow he took police action, but we have to remember, this is a narrative that the actual people that killed him, that's what they're saying. They're saying that he pulled a weapon out. They're saying he chased the individual. They're saying that he turned and was face-to-face with Dutton, Officer Dutton, who's a sergeant now, at least a sergeant, the one who ultimately shot him. They're claiming that they were face-to-face with each other with their guns drawn. There is no empirical data to prove Omar Edwards ever pulled his weapon. And then they never was able to explain why, if they were chest-to-chest facing each other, why did 2 rounds end up in Omar Edwards' back and another round in his forearm? Obviously, they were lying, but they didn't know that we knew where the entrance wounds were. And so for the police commissioner to go on record that very next morning, as well as the police commissioner and the mayor, by the way, to say that this shooting had nothing to do with race without the benefit of an investigation shows it had everything to do with race, and that Omar Edwards in those 3 police officers' minds was nothing but a perp. And consequently, they shoved it under the table. The police officers who arrived there, some who stood over the 2 years he was on the job at roll calls with Omar Edwards. Some of them were crying. They stood there and watched him lay down on the ground for close to 20, 25 minutes, almost a half an hour, until they ultimately rushed him to Harlem Hospital, where he expired. So there's a lot of contributing factors to his death. First, the unwarranted, we believe, shooting, and then to keep him there to try to develop a story while they were in communication with 1PP on how to handle this situation. So sometimes the cover-up is just as worse as the actual crime. And to this day, we believe that there was no justice in this case and that Officer Dutton, as well as the other 2 police officers, should have been tried for the death of Omar Edwards.
Right. Now, our hotline, we received a phone call from a civilian who had called and said that he felt bad because he was driving a truck, and after the shooting, the police had stopped the traffic, and that Omar Edwards had laid on the ground for a long period of time. He didn't even know it was a police officer who was killed, that it was a so-called friendly fire, what they call a friendly fire incident. He called the hotline because he was disturbed that this individual who was shot was allowed to remain in the street for so long. And then when he heard it was a police officer, he was doubly shocked. So he called 100 Blacks to let us know that. And I never forget when members of our organization, I know you were in that meeting as well, met with Morgenthau. We asked him, did y'all see the camera? Right where this incident occurred is an NYPD camera right on 125th Street and 2nd Avenue. We asked them, did you ever view the camera? And they called a timeout on the meeting. They didn't want to talk no further because nobody wanted to discuss, once again, the footage on that particular camera, because the camera, as they say, doesn't lie. As you said, it was an unfortunate police murder. The Union Police Department can care less about black officers that are murdered by white police officers. There's a long history
That's right.
of black police officers who were shot in the back and murdered. And one of the things we always say, whenever a black police officer that gets shot by a white police officer survives, he said, I never heard the officer said, please don't move, which is the warning that a police officer is supposed to give before they take utilize deadly physical force. They're supposed to say, please don't move to whoever they're dealing with. The black officer, when they survived, said, I never heard the police officer said, please don't move. In every incident where the black officer was killed, the white officer said, I said, please don't move.
Right.
Before they empty their weapon in the back of the black police officers taking police action.
And the district attorney's office knew full well what had happened, because they never explained how could they be face to face with each other, yet the rounds ended up, the entrance wounds ended up in his back. And certainly that was never answered, and they could not answer successfully what happened to all the cameras. They had a real-time camera that went straight to 1PP that was right there on the scene. They had the bridge, Taru.
That's right.
Cameras right there. They had housing development cameras right there. They had one store owner right there on the corner, and he told us they took his they took the camera away. They confiscated the tape because the tape caught the entire incident from start to finish. They took it from him, and so it only shows you NYPD operated just like they did in the Laquan McDonald and other cases in Chicago, where they just went and took the tapes right there when Chicago police did that in the Wendy's or McDonald's, took the tape straight up, and that's what happened. It was some thug stuff. Took it, destroyed the evidence of an investigation, and so you had to go by the narrative that shooter gave.
Right, and it's funny that you reminded me that the store owner told us, because we conducted our own investigation, that NYPD did confiscate his cameras, and the camera's right outside where the shooting occurred, right on the corner. That store, I think, is still there today. So when we asked the district attorney, well, did you ever view the camera? It looked like a light went off on top of their head, and they looked at each other in the room like, we're not supposed to talk about the camera. And then that's when they gave the infamous quote.
Right.
What did they tell us?
They said, look, we got to do a timeout. Timeout. They said, look, one of our lead investigators is on vacation. He'll be back Monday.
And how about Sandy and Rev?
And you want to tell that part?
Tell that part too, brother.
All right, brother.
This is from Robert Morgan, one of the most powerful district attorneys in the country at the time.
Well, he said to us, because we were pressing the issue, we asked and want to thank Alton Maddox. I had a discussion with Alton Maddox before we met with the district attorney's office, and he said, make sure you ask about the report. They have to write an official report after a homicide and ask for that official report, the district attorney's office. So when we asked about that report, they said, well, we only do that in special cases. And so I said, well, a black police officer that's killed is not a special case. So then they didn't know. They were at their wits' end, and they had to call a timeout because they couldn't explain why the rounds were in the back. They could not explain what happened to all the cameras. They couldn't explain why was there not an investigation done by their office and then an official report wrote by their office. So all they had the narrative that Officer Dutton and the other two police officers gave. So they called the timeout because they just saw that we were more than prepared for them. So that's...
What about the Sandy and...
and then they said to us, when they called the timeout, they said, look, guys, y'all know, they said, look, it's fairly obvious that you have not spoke to Sandy and Michael. And then we looked at each other and they said, it's obvious you haven't sat down and talked to Sandy and Michael. Now, Sandy and Michael was two attorneys, known. That's Sanford Rubenstein and Michael Harding.
No, it's not Harding.
Harding.
Yeah, Michael Harding.
You said it right. Michael Harding. These are two Reverend Sharpton's attorneys. So when he said that, he's saying, in other words, everybody, what it was, short story, is that everybody's on board with y'all. 100 blacks in law enforcement, y'all are the only ones making noise.
That's right.
All the other traditional civil rights organizations understand this one. They all backed off. The only ones that are not backing off is 100 blacks in law enforcement. Right. That's what happened.
And so we were definitely took note that they were actually, didn't y'all speak to this attorneys, as if we get our marching orders from attorneys
That's
who
right.
have private meetings with you to quell everything that goes on in New York City. And the same thing happened with the rape trial of DSK. Our organization was the only one that continued to press it and charge the Manhattan District Attorney at the time with malfeasance. And then there was another case that I wanted to bring up, but I can't think of it right now. But to finish our historical case, the Ali Summit.
That was an historic one. Muhammad Ali, thank God, refused to step forward at that time. And thank God it wasn't only the Nation of Islam behind him. The most prominent athletes of the day, you're talking Bill Russell, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then Lou Alcindor. You had Jim Brown and so many others. You had Dr. Harry Edwards, the famous sociologist, sports sociologist, all together to organize it. And certainly there were other athletes there, and they were all there, football players, basketball players, all to support Muhammad Ali, which you don't see today. You don't really see those types of galvanization of great athletes, all top of their game, all top of the line professionals, all gathering around like they could gather around Kaepernick. You didn't see that. Now, a lot of them did follow suit on what he did, but you didn't see them all get together in one press conference to say, we're with this brother, like you saw in the Ali Summit. And wish we had the picture to show you. Normally, Nat in the control room will be showing you right now a picture of the Ali Summit, and you will see just how fantastic to this day that looks.
Right, and it's funny that you mentioned Colin Kaepernick, who's a football quarterback who took a stand against the national anthem. He brought so much attention to the national anthem because of the lack of justice African Americans are receiving in regards to police murders. And we mentioned one about black cops being murdered by white police officers. And there wasn't a big rush. There wasn't a meeting like with Muhammad Ali, justifiably so, to come and support this brother. Now, Colin Kaepernick, for those who don't know, he's still attempting to make it on the team. There's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, but he's being whiteballed for taking a stand. And real quick commentary as far as I'm concerned, I had not even known that the third stanza of this country's national anthem disrespects the honor and the memory of our enslaved ancestors. So I don't see how any intelligent African American would stand as long as this particular song is this nation's national anthem, which disparaged the suffering. Because Francis Scott Key, who was a slave owner himself, said that there would be no peace for the enslaved African. I don't care even when he's in the grave. So the gall of this white supremacist, this racist, to make this disparaging remark in regards to the memory and the sufferings of our ancestors. So as long as those stanzas are part of this particular song, there's no way in the world any African American, any intelligent African American who respects the sufferings of our grandmothers and our aunts and uncles, etc., should honor this anthem. So big ups to all of those for coming to the defense of Muhammad Ali, who had the right to take the stand that he did take. Fast forward, we have a lot of stories that we want to update on. The Tamir Rice is the first one. Give an update to the family on the Tamir Rice.
Yeah, and I'm going to get it to you quick with respect to time. Tamir Rice, as you know, was killed, 12-year-old that was killed by two police officers, Cleveland police officers. Now, after all was said and done and the dust cleared, 2 years later, this is what happened. No charges. No criminal charges. Let me say this correctly. No criminal charges from the district attorney's office. The dispatcher was suspended 8 days for failure to alert police that the 911 caller said it was a toy gun. So the dispatcher got 8 days suspension. The driver of the police vehicle gone back. He was suspended 10 days for driving too close to Tamir Rice and failing to report the exact time they arrived on the scene. You're hearing me right. He got suspended 10 days for just driving too close for Tamir Rice and for failure to give the exact time on his report that they arrived on the scene. Third person, the shooter, Lowman, Timothy Holman, was fired for failure to report revealing information in his personal folder. No meat. Now in his charges, you haven't heard nobody being charged with anything having to do with Tamir Rice. He was fired, they claim, because when he was with the smaller police department surrounding Cleveland, he was a basket case. He was a nut job, and he exploded in the shooting range. And at other times, they saw that he was unfit. So because he didn't tell the Cleveland Police Department, it's ridiculous that he was unfit. It was in his report that the other police department gave them. So it's like he didn't tell on himself. But you didn't read the report. The report said the commanding officer from the other police department said this guy is not a good candidate for Cleveland's police department. He's unfit.
And then this same thing happened in another case, a couple of other cases. I know there was a case, I can't think of it right now, where an officer was involved in a shooting. I think it was a sister that they pulled out who had a bad history in another department.
Right. Several of them.
And they go from a department to department, something that definitely shouldn't happen. An update on the Puerto Rican Day Parade. Some of you may know that the Puerto Rican Day Parade officials had chosen to honor Oscar Lopez, who was one of the leaders of the FALN, a Puerto Rican nationalist organization.
That's right.
Who was involved allegedly in bombings around the country. Well, the organizer of the Puerto Rican Day Parade, which just so happens to come up next Sunday, had chosen to honor him. He was recently pardoned by Barack Obama, who, of course, didn't pardon any black, members of the Black Panther Party, to my knowledge.
Right. And
he could have. Some of them have even been involved in some of the actions that he's accused of being. But anyways, organizers chose to honor him. Now, he's like one of 23 honorees. But so many sponsors had pulled out, so many politicians have pulled out because of the organizers' decision to honor him, that the organizers, I think, in my estimation, sort of nudged him. And he just recently stated that he will not accept the honoree position on that parade. But it only shows that we do not have, be it black or Latino, any independent organizations. All of our organizations are tied to the hip of corporate white America, who has an agenda, which is many times in opposition to ours. And it shows that the organizers of this particular parade, now I'm not saying whether or not it was a good decision to honor him or a bad decision, but it was their decision. It's their parade. But white corporate America punished them or refused to finance them, so they recanted on their position to honor a member of their community. That shows you that our community to this date is still not independent, especially when we're tied to the hip of corporate white America. Also an update story, Milwaukee police officer who recently shot a homeless man. Now, Michael, I think we had a bet that this guy was going to get convicted.
Well, yeah, in this particular case, the ridiculous part about this one is that, yes, he might have had mental problems. He had somewhat of a mental history. But how do you justify shooting a brother 14 times because he's sleeping in a park? Mm-hmm. Now, 2 other police officers responded to that same thing twice by the same sergeant who said, look, we got to report that somebody's sleeping in the park in Milwaukee. I guess they have slow days in Milwaukee and nothing else to do. So they went over there to a guy that was sleeping twice. And guess what those police officers said? He's not doing anything. He's harmless. He's sleeping. And they left. But what does Christopher Manny do? No, he is not. He can't allow a black man to sleep in the park. So he goes in his pockets. He starts patting him down while he's sleeping. And the young man Hamilton, Dante Hamilton, wakes up and ultimately he pumps 14 rounds into his body, killing him. And he was only fired not for the shooting, because the district attorney is refusing to press charges. He said that it was not excessive use of force. The district attorney said that, but departmentally, they said that his procedures in approaching this young man was wrong. And I know it's only because the 2 other police officers went there, left, because he wasn't doing anything wrong, just sleeping on a bench. So ultimately, that's why they fired him, because if 2 guys went there twice and nothing happened, and you go there and you put 14 rounds in it. The problem obviously was you. So he didn't get charged with anything, but he was fired.
And this individual, of course, he was unarmed.
He was unarmed, not committing a crime.
So, you can imagine, I mean, there's people in combat situations in Iraq who's not shot 14 times, and they are armed, So good update on that particular story. Something that happened current. Some of you, I know one of my favorite programs, which is 30 Frames a Second, talked about the Bill Maher comment. Some of you who've seen his conversation with Senator Ben Sasse, where he made the comment when Sasse asked him, why don't you come down to my state, to the fields of my state and do some work or whatever. And then he very cool, calm, and collectively said, the fields, I'm a house nigga. Now, Bill Maher is, of course, a male Caucasian, and the comfortable position that he took when he even made that. And, of course, the senator didn't check him and say, listen, I think that's an inappropriate comment, so he co-signed it. There's been a reluctance so far on HBO to fire Bill Maher. I'm pretty sure if he made a derogatory statement against the homosexual community, if he do the word faggot, I ain't no faggot. Right. I'm pretty sure that he would be bombarded with demands to be fired. Or if he made an anti-Jewish remark, any position on the casualness that he used the term, I'm a house nigga, as if that's something to joke about. And I'm one who, even with black comedians, make jokes about the enslavement of our people, who understand the sufferings and what our people really went through. That's holy. There's nothing to joke about. There's nothing to laugh about. There's nothing to mock, to act as if, there is some humor in it. The 400 years enslavement of our people was some of the most diabolical, got the opportunity to use that word, treatment that man has ever experienced with other man. But the casualness of his uses of the word, the term of house nigga.
Well, I didn't like it when Cedric the Entertainer said his remarks about Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King. Didn't like it when, that guy who looks like a monster, the one who said Little Wayne. Right. When Little Wayne made his comments that I'm a beat up yo, to a woman, her sexual organs. Beat up your vagina like Emmett Till was beat up. I thought that was inappropriate. So I'm not going to accept it from a white man joking about the house and the field and the tragedies that they went through. And I want to borrow something that Noel talks about, the myth of the white liberal. See, he's supposedly a liberal. And since he's a comedian, he's got a double license now that he could take a slap at black people, and somehow we supposed to laugh or accept it. So it's unacceptable to me when black men do it, and it's definitely unacceptable when a white person does it.
And, one of the fads is a lot of white so-called liberals say, well, listen, we can use the term nigga, N-I-G-G-A. It's not the same as N-I-G-G-E-R, which is garbage. And they claim because some rap artists or some young people may use. There's a lot of words young people use. Like, I never see them saying it's justified to call a woman a B, and a lot of rap artists use the B word. They would never go that far. So it's definitely unacceptable for a man who understands language and word and the historical usage of that word and experience of those individuals to mock that and use that.
That's right.
Real quick, the last NYPD story. An NYPD officer recently got 3 years probation for assaulting a female.
Yeah, well, this guy, you're not going to believe this one. This is just something you can't even make up.
I think on Community Cop, they'll believe it because they hear it so often.
This guy, Eugene Donnelly,
police officer,
he had he had got in 2012, he was part of a team that arrested a young teen who was shooting his weapon. He arrested them, and then he was getting an award for that in 2014 from the de Blasio administration. And so earlier that day, he got an award for bravery from the current administration. And then that night, supposedly because he was drinking, he did some drinking that night. And then he barges in to a woman's apartment with just his underwear on, barges into the apartment, pushes her, starts beating her. He hit her at least 20 times, stood over her, went in her refrigerator, drank some milk, and stood there for a while, then runs. and never reported the crime, which he was the center of the crime itself. Didn't report it. He claimed he was dreaming. He thought he was dreaming, and that he was sleepwalking, and got 3 years probation. The district attorney chose not to. He got convicted of misdemeanor assault. He's still on the job as we speak right now on modified duty. He was just convicted last week of something that happened, 3 years ago. He just got convicted of misdemeanor assault, and he still has his job, his gun, and his shield is confiscated at this moment. And so I don't know what they're going to decide to do with him. But he's not facing jail time because in March he volunteered to plead guilty to a misdemeanor charge.
That's Bill de Blasio. And before we go to our phone calls, this is a story I wanted to talk about. Your president, he's receiving a lot of criticism for his decision to withdraw and not to announce his support for NATO. We talked about what NATO is. NATO is a group of European nations, white nations, not one African nation involved. They have a pact amongst themselves saying that if any one of us is attacked, then we're all being attacked. And I take issue with that because the European nations have been some of the most ruthless invaders, colonizers,
right,
assassins of foreign heads of state, presidents, and invaders of foreign lands, the stealing of natural resources of countries. And there's nothing in this so-called the Article 5 in NATO, which says that if one of us attack, all of us attack. Nothing in there saying that if you take, which is NATO, attack a nation illegally, that we will criticize you, or if that nation responds and attacks you, that we'll stand on the side. So it's sort of, you talk about bullying. This is bullying to the highest order. And this, this conglomerate of European nations, this is white supremacy. This is international white supremacy. They have a pact with each other. If anybody attacks you, they attacking me, and we'll come to your defense. And this is why European nations are able to go to a place like Libya, in particular France, United States, and England, and murder a head of state, that had one of the highest standards of living on the African continent, and just cause complete chaos with no criticism whatsoever.
That's right.
This is why the United States can invade Iraq saying they had weapons of mass destruction, make a presentation before United Nations, which is totally bogus, nothing but lies, and nobody on the planet, no government on the planet organized itself to put any sanctions against the United States of America for when the dust settles, 1 million Iraqis dead. This is why President Bush can say, I ordered our troops to do waterboarding, which has been declared by United Nations to be torture, and that torture is illegal on an international level. But there's no penalty. There's no criticism because these bully nations, these NATO nations, function as a criminal cartel. They go all the way throughout the planet, and particularly to non-white countries, to murder, to invade, to rob them of their natural resources. And Donald Trump is being criticized because of, he's standing for different reasons. Not that he's not in line with that, white supremacist domination over the planet and the planet resources and peoples, but for other reasons, he's standing back and say he may not support Article 5 of NATO. But that's where we are right now. We have our phone lines up. We're in a different studio today, so I'm not certain if we have any callers as of yet. So I don't see any numbers up, but we'll continue building. You wanted to make a comment on this, talk about sports. Jason Whitlock, he's a sports correspondent. What does he work for? ESPN?
Fox.
He works for Fox News.
Fox.
He's a sport correspondent. Recently, LeBron James, who everybody knows is okay. We do have telephone call, but let me just get this story. Well, let's go to our phone call. So we're a little back. Here. Hopefully, we can get back to the Jason Whitlock story. First caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
We can't hear in here.
Okay. Yeah, we can't hear in this studio.
Community Cop, how you?
Okay, all right, let's go to Jason Whitlock. Our producers will come back in and let us know when the problem is corrected. Jason Whitlock, he's a sports commentator for Fox 5. Recently, LeBron James' home, someone had scribbled in one of his mansions, one of his second houses, was it a noose or the N-word?
The N-word.
Right, and LeBron took issue with it, talked about regardless of whether or not you're a rich African-American or you're a poor African-American, all of us experience, these same hostile, racist, sometimes acts. And Jason Whitlock took issue with him, stating that he's too rich to be complaining about racism or white supremacy, which is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your opinions on Jason Whitlock?
Well, he said that LeBron is embracing some left-wing victimization agenda. He said that LeBron James was not traumatized. He said for him to mention his family, he said his family's in Cleveland. Why would he mention his family? He said, why would he even look at it as racism? He said, because racism only affects poor blacks, not rich blacks. He went on to say that that's a $20 million Brentwood mansion. He said, consequently, he said his staff or his flunkies will have that fixed in no time, and then the police department can take it from there and resolve the matter and find out who did it. But he said it's not racism, and he said you cannot be that rich and be a victim of racism. He went on to say that he said LeBron James is richer than me. He said, but I have enough money where I don't feel any racism. He said, when I come into the studio, white guys ask me, "Oh, can I help you, Mr. Whitlock?" He said when he goes home, he drives his car, throws his keys to someone in his apartment complex. They park his car, and they ask him, "Is everything all right?" So he's living the life. So he's saying there's no such thing as racism if you're a rich black man. That's only something that ill affects poor black people.
And that's so ludicrous because, when you determine if something's an act of racism, you don't look at the financial background of the victim. You look at the act of the perpetrator. Because if a person is rich, that doesn't absolve him from a racist act or the act of racism or white supremacy. For the very notion that he suggests that because LeBron James is rich, that he's not a victim in this instance is stupid. Now, this is a black man also, or this is a black-skinned man, Jason Whitlock. But, he very frequently makes disparaging remarks about the African-American community. And this seems to be the new wave. A lot of people receive a paycheck, and that's paying somebody to be in check, to disparage legitimate African-American concerns and to dismiss any complaints about white supremacy or racism. Let's see if our phone calls are up at this time. Do we have a call on the line?
Yes, sir. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Okay, here we go.
From home.
Right.
Yes. I want to know one thing, brother. I know y'all understand how Malcolm and Black Panther felt about us protecting our people, even the diggings for defense. My question to y'all brothers is, when are we going to do something about people murdering our people and stop sitting back talking about it rather than doing something about it? Because that's the only thing that's going to deal with these people doing what they've been doing to us over 500 years. And I just want to hear a response from y'all, brother.
All right. Thank you for your phone call, brother.
Well, from the outset, Brother Kareem, all you're going to hear is words from us here. This is not the forum to basically plan, strategize, or organize around the things you're talking about. That has to be done at a different type of forum other than this. So if you're waiting to hear that head, obviously you would not understand the gravity of what you're asking. Certainly, I think that we should be able to defend ourselves. I think we have the God-given right of self-defense that Father Lucas always points out to us. I think that we should protect men, women, and children, especially children, from the dangers that beset them. We have seen a rash of activity that's been upped so much since this new administration has come in, and you could trace it all the way back ever since November of 2008 when President Obama won. You've seen the violence ever since then. You've seen the uptick of whites purchasing weapons. You've seen now all the rounds. You can't even buy rounds now in the South because as soon as they come in, they're gone. So obviously, stockpiling is going on. So I understand what you're saying, Brother Kareem, and certainly I can empathize and certainly identify with everything you're saying. But this is not the forum for that. And if you know it, then you should have already like minds with you that feel the same way you do, because nothing is done by individuals. We must do, as our brother Kwame Ture always said, organize, organize, organize.
Right. And as you know, I agree wholeheartedly. Self-preservation being the first law of nature, every people, every community, every nation has a right to protect itself against an attack. Self-preservation being the first law of nature. So, that goes without saying. But the solution, or one of the solutions to our situation is, as Michael just stated, and we always say on this program, is our community is poorly organized. The attack against our community, be it political attack, be it economics, be it in education, our people are being attacked in any way, shape imaginable in our existence on this planet. And we refuse to come together to organize, to identify that we're being attacked, and then to provide a philosophy and a defense to protect our community. That's being, self-preservation. And that philosophy has to be black nationalism. White people believe in white nationalism. I never forget when Giuliani said Obama was anti-American because he was anti-colonial, that he was against, the colonial powers. We'll be with you in the second caller. So white people will tell you they believe in white supremacy. They believe in white people colonizing or dominating other peoples, brown peoples of the planet. Just a second caller, of the planet Earth. So we have to adopt that philosophy and be just as dogmatic and supporting it as they are, and making certain that our community remains or is disenfranchised. But next caller, work on the community cop. Where you calling from? All right, you was interrupting me 3 or 4 times. Now's your time to speak. Where you calling from, caller? Okay, click that one off. He's probably not listening. Next caller, work on the community cop. Where you calling from? All right, we may be having problems with the phone. As I stated earlier, we're in a new studio. So, maybe our phone calls aren't up to par. Let me try one more time. Is there a caller on the line? Right, okay. All right, scratch that.
Well, let me just say for the record that there is an uptick also with blacks forming gun clubs. The NRA, the membership has increased across the country with blacks also. There are blacks that are going through the necessary steps all over the country to now form these clubs under the ban of the NRA. Go right ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead, caller. Can you hear us?
Good evening, gentlemen.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Go ahead, brother.
All right, I know the problem. I can't hear you, but you can hear me, so I'm just going to talk, brothers.
Mm-hmm.
The ESPN recently just rehired Hank Williams Jr. to sing the National Football Monday Night Football theme. 5 years after he made comments about Obama, comparing him to Hitler.
And the Confederate flag he used to.
The New York Giants also signed the kicker, knowing he had domestic violence issues. My point, Colin Kaepernick still does not have a job.
Right.
Now, the New York Giants owner recently said that if his team were to sign Colin Kaepernick, that his fan base, nobody would come to the game. And not to mention Donald Trump, who made a subtle threat to NFL owners about signing Kaepernick. Now, Kaepernick, unfortunately, is seeing injustice staring him back at the face because he's definitely being whiteballed. And if I were him, he didn't find a job, I would sue the NFL for discrimination suit. Now, LeBron James also said last week that it's tough being a black man in America, and Colin Kaepernick is now proof of that statement. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, brother.
So many excellent points, brother.
Strong point. The kicker's name is Josh Brown. He beat his wife senseless several times, and even after he beat her once, and the giant other football players had to stop him, and they had to take his wife out of that hotel and put her in another hotel. because she couldn't stay near him without him putting his hands on her. He still got re-signed to a 2-year extension by John Mara. Got signed, extended 2 more years for $4 million for a kicker after beating his wife and his nose. So he's saying you're going to get backlash from a person who does not refuses to kneel to the national anthem. Not so much the flag, it's the anthem. And yet, a man who beats his wife, you don't foresee backlash from that. That makes no sense.
Right. All right, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from, caller?
Brother Ray, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
How you doing? Listen, I'm wondering if the names start changing, if Maya will have called herself a house cracker or a honky, and what would be the backlash if we start using those names? Number 2, with all the money that LeBron James paid for that house, do you think he will have had surveillance cameras, being that the house cost so much money? That's my second question. And my third question, if it's going to be something where we have to bear arms and do what we got to do, it must not be said to anyone. Nobody is supposed to know when those meetings is occurring, and then you would get some things done. But as always, it might be a snitch somewhere around that's close friends with the people that's having that meeting.
All right. Thank you for your call, brother. Thank you for your phone call.
Well, that's a police matter with respect to surveillance. Obviously, in that area of all millionaires, obviously they have surveillance cameras. And so it's a matter of how far the police are willing to take it, because it very well might be one of them. It's not like the guy who put a nigger in front of his house is digging ditches for a living. This person can be prominent, rich, could be the son of a lawyer, could be a lawyer himself. We know, who knows? So it all depends on what the LAPD, what they choosing to do in this particular case, because that community is all millionaires and billionaires. So
and as far as African Americans making disparaging remarks about white people, that's not going to happen. You might as well forget that. Even comedians, when they tell jokes, if they tell a joke that's kind of a joke on a white person, it'd be like, yo, dance funny, or yo, do this funny. But the joke, when they talk about black people, they always talk about our character or personal traits, which they don't do white. Black people are always the butt of the joke. I mean, even from black comedians, so you're not going to get nobody.
Well, blacks soften it by making that white voice that Richard Pryor did 30, 40 years ago. They would make that voice so you kind of like laugh. And so they soften you up with the voice inflections to let you know this is strictly a joke. I don't even feel this way about you. So that's a whole different thing. You have license as a
but they never make a joke about the humanity of white people.
Right.
They always make something silly that even white people can laugh at. But when they talk about African Americans, even black comedians, it's about
they can't dance.
Yeah,
they don't have no rhythm.
People, they don't have no rhythm. White people chuckle at that because they know they can't. For them. Well, now they can because they watch so much MTV and so much black programs. And even in terms of singing, when you listen to how some white folks sing, you can tell they've been listening to black music very long, because I grew up in an era where you could tell the difference between a white singer and a black singer. Now some of these white singers, boy, they've been studying Mary J. Blige and Aretha Franklin and some of these singers, for a very long time. But do we have a new caller on the line? New caller.
Hello?
Yes, where you calling from, caller?
Harlem. This is HP. Hotep.
Hotep, brother.
I've got a question. What do you feel about Colin Kaepernick not voting?
Right, okay.
It was no one to vote for it. To me, that's not a major issue. I know Stephen A. Smith act like the world ended when he didn't vote. Many of us have little to no choices to vote for. He chose not to vote at that time. And if you think about it, it's no big deal. I think more about the fact that he sent 60,000 pounds of food to Africa. I think that he put millions of dollars into black organizations. To me, he's putting his money where his mouth is. I will not be diverted by something minor like the fact that he, on a personal level, didn't vote. He's teaching children. He's paying organizations to uplift our community. If he personally didn't vote that time, look at the choices, the major choices you had. You had Secretary Clinton, you had 17 different Republicans, and you had what's the guy, Bernie Sanders. That was your choices.
Right. All right. All right. Do we have another call on the line? I know there's a slight delay. Caller, are you there?
Hello? Yes. Calling from Brooklyn?
Okay, go ahead, brother.
Okay. I'm still interested in that brother. Like I said, I want to know if he's smarter than the 5th grade. Did he commit that murder on that white girl that they said he was, he raped?
Yes, sir.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you for that call, brother. That case, of course, is still being investigated. You have his defense attorneys doing their investigations.
Right.
You have the prosecutor doing his investigations. We've been plugged into the defense team. So there's a lot of concerns that we have, as well as our community have, about his arrest. And we'll see where the facts lead. If he committed the crime, of course, he deserved to be placed under the jail. But if he didn't commit the crime, he deserves to be released. So, time we'll give once we get more information, we'll keep our community abreast on the specifics of that particular case. Is there another caller on the line? Welcome to Community Cop.
What's going on, brothers? How y'all doing?
Hold that, brother.
Right.
Brothers, I just want to divert a little bit. I just want to say, in terms of people who have criminal records in New York City, like myself, trying to struggle and trying to get a job, and it gets difficult because, when you apply for a job, your criminal record gets, stapled each and every job application, and of course there's high discrimination from that. Mm-hmm. So are there any laws in progress right now, as far as you know, that can give individuals like myself with a criminal record, a second chance, basically, without being discriminated from getting a job and
Well, yeah, just real quickly, without me being able to state specifically what it was, what they're trying to do now, there are several organizations, and if you call us later, we probably can let you know who they are. They're trying to divorce your criminal record from job applications, for higher education and things like that. I forgot what it's called, but it's been attempted by some elected officials to put it before the state assembly that there should not be that, especially once you've done your time. But at least some people are looking at things like that.
And if the heads of most agencies in the city, they can sort of determine, what they can allow. Of course, certain crimes will not be allowable for certain city jobs, but a lot of these city agencies, mayors, commissioners have a right to be a little more flexible. Getting something passed in the state assembly is most of the time not a problem, but it's the state senate where you have your difficulty, because there's a lot of good people trying to pass a lot of good laws, especially in regards to our community. And the problem is getting it out of committee and then getting it passed on the state floor. That's where most of the problems occur. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm calling from Harlem.
Hotel, sister.
Hi, good evening. I have one quick question. You were talking about Omar Epps. I was wondering about his family. Did they pursue it, or were they trying to get the answers to the discrepancies in his shooting death?
Right.
And what happened? And was Sanford Rubenstein their lawyer or something?
Right. Okay, excellent question, sister. It sounds like you might know something.
Well, put it this way, sis. Wish you was the first caller instead, almost the last caller. The family was divided. I wish we just had the time to tell you who the culprits were in dividing it. But if you listen to the show closely, you know who the culprits are. The two lawyers, as well as Reverend Sharpton and all of them, they all played a role in deciding to go with the mother of Omar Edwards' children.
Right. Not his mother.
Not his mother.
Because when we met with the district attorney, it was at the bequest of his mother, his biological mother. And no one loves a son like their mother. Now, I love all you wives out there, but no one loves a son like their mother.
Right.
His mother was crying for justice. Now, his wife just so happened to have a father who was a detective in the New York City Police Department.
And it looks like he advised her to roll with the police department. That the police department said, stay away from 100 blacks.
Right.
We got you. Now, the chip they had over her was the fact that she had 2 children.
Right.
2 years old and less than 1 year old. So she had 2 babies and said, if you stay away from 100 blacks and you roll with us, do not make any statements against us. We'll make sure that your children grow up with money, and they'll be able to get an education and all that. So they use some tactics that they use to divide that family. It's ugly. I don't enjoy talking about it.
Right.
I wish we had the time to explain it, but this is not really the forum to go into the whole thing. It's ugly.
Right, because she's a victim as well. Her husband, the father of her kids, was murdered, and she has to raise her kids now. Now, we attempted to reach out to her with the concerns we had about the case, but as there's so many of these cases, be it, the police murders, they use the ability to give the family compensation to the tune of millions of dollars. Now, if the family play hardball, perhaps that money will come at 5-7 years down the line. But the mother had reached out to us, and we was running around. We met with the district attorney's office. We met with some politicians, and that's who have reached out to our organization, to help her to get justice for her son. But next, thank you for your call, sister.
Okay.
Next caller, welcome to Community Cup. Oh, that's it? Yeah. We have one more call? All right. Closing comments.
Okay, just want to thank so many people. We had a tribute to Queen Mother Leola Maddox this past Saturday. This is a picture of Leola Maddox. And we had a beautiful ceremony. We had African Echoes Trust, Graham and Nooney and others. We had Straight Black Pride, Tad Cromwell, Keisha Forrester. United African Movement was there. The Freedom Retreat for Boys and Girls, Harold Wilbert and so many others representing them. Sankofa Academy, Yulene Ennis, and so many people. We had Our Time Press got a story going on it. The Amsterdam is going to do a story on it. Dr. Umar Johnson, Assemblyman Charles Barron, he was strong that day. We had Reverend Oliver, the one that helped close Birmingham, one of the leaders from Birmingham. Pam Africa came from Philly, fired up. We had Dr. Melva Jackson, the one who wrote the book on Tawana Brawley. We just had so many people. Agnaton Kobe Reed from the Black Inventors Parade from 1985. We had so many people there. Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Kaba. It was just a pantheon of great speakers, all paying tribute to Sister Leola Maddox. We love her so much,
and it was definitely well deserved. On behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank our engineers, our producers, Nat Kitt, Sheila Berry, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, Veronica Kitt, Baby, and all those others who helped us. I want to speak on real quick.
Judy McNeil.
Okay, there was a documentary, and I'm going to slip this in hopefully before we cut off, on religion on CNN, and I always talk about these so-called programs that you see on race, and they talked about so-called voodoo. I'm not sure if some of the family members caught it. It was hosted by Reza, who's an Asian,